We're just waiting on a bit of live streaming technicalities to happen, so...
It wants to stream the other way.
Right, folks, well, I might just start and do the introductory while we sort that out. Before we commence, some housekeeping. The toilet's located on my left over there, and if there is an emergency... How's that? Rightio. In the case of an emergency, please wait for instructions from council staff. There's a few in the room, and Callie up the back with a hand up will identify themselves. I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging and paying respect to the Nurrungeri people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and we pay respect to all Australians who have made and continue to make a positive contribution to our culture and way of life in this country that we live in and share together, Australia. I'd first like to acknowledge our local MP, Jason Virgo, over here. If you could put your hand up, Jason. Thanks very much for coming this evening. And also your councillors. We have the Mayor, Paul Simmons, Councillor Coleman, Councillor Maidment, all sitting up the back there together. And Councillor Bland down the front here, and Councillor Roundtree, and apologies from Councillor O'Hara and Arthur. We've come together this evening to provide the community with an update on the Tailem Bend Medical Centre. The format tonight will mainly include hearing from Wayne Champion on my left here, who is the CEO of the local health network, along with a short update from myself on council, and Julie Barry on my right here, who is the presiding member of the HAC. I'm going to respectfully request that we allow our two guest speakers to share their updates, and then we'll be conducting a Q&A session at the end where you'll have your chance to ask questions and to put your view across. We are streaming live, as you can see, some technical things happening on your right and our left, and the recording with a link to it will be provided on Council's website for those who are unable to be here in person tonight and have any questions. For anybody watching live, if you do have any further questions, please get in touch with one of your councillors or contact Council either by phone or by email. Now, Council has been actively looking at improving health outcomes across the region. We've continued to face a loss of services, and that's not something that we can tolerate if we want to see our towns and our region grow. The Council Chamber formed a committee earlier in the year to investigate declining Commonwealth, state and privately funded health services across the Coorong, to identify gaps and explore solutions, to foster partnerships and provide recommendations to Council focused on maintaining continuity of care. Council adopted its new community vision plan this year, and there were 575 residents that contributed to that document. Now, the number one issue right across the council area, that came out of that process was the need for sustainable health services. We've been trying to think out of the side of the box with regards to what we can do in getting medical providers into the district, and we're focused on working with the HAC and the LHN to ensure ongoing services. And I particularly thank Wayne and the LHN for some very constructive conversations recently. We've been also talking to businesses in the district about health needs that they might have and whether there's any opportunities, particularly at this end of our council area, to cooperate with them on medical services that meet both community and business needs. We've also recently put our district forward for federal funding through the Primary Health Network to conduct a thin market study. We're optimistic of being successful with that program, and we've had support from the State Health Minister to the Federal Minister. We're hoping that it might open up further funding to meet any identified needs that come out of that study. Tonight is about giving you an update, but also about hearing from you, giving you an opportunity to tell us your concerns and what you would like to see and how we might be able to achieve it locally. I'd now like to introduce and welcome Chair of the Coorong Health Advisory Committee, Julie Barry. Now, the Health Advisory Committee has a major role in relaying ideas and views from the community to the local health network. So Julie or the HAC, are your first point of contact in terms of getting feedback through to Wayne. They can also make recommendations directly to the Minister and the LHN's board about any aspect of the provision of health services in the district. Julie, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. Thanks, Jonathan. He's actually taken a little bit of the wind out of my sails because he's just told you some of the things that I'm about to tell you. So I'm just going to tell you again anyway. HAC bridges the gap between the local communities and regional health care. We are a voice to raise issues and priorities directly to the Health Minister. We are also a means of two-way communication between you, the public, and the Regional Health Service. We hold assets, manage bequests and provide advice on local health service needs and priorities. The Local Health Advisory Council is made up of community members, can't read my own writing, I'm sorry, from Tailem Bend, Meningie, Canalpin and areas in between. It has been quite devastating for our members to see the depths of despair and distress that this issue surrounding your doctors has caused this community. None of us have been immune to seeing that. As presiding member of the local HAC, I can assure you that we are working in the background with the Riverland Mallee Coorong Local Health Network via Wayne and with Coorong Council and their network to try and resolve this issue. There's nothing more really I can say right now, so I'm hoping that Wayne can fill in a lot of the details. But I would like to remind you all that the Health Advisory Council is holding their AGM on the same day as it happens that the current doctors are leaving the town on the 14th of October. The AGM will be held in Meningie, and you are all welcome to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. I'd now like to introduce and welcome Wayne Champion, our CEO from the LHN. The role of the network is to manage and deliver public health and hospital services across the Riverland, Murray-Mallee and Coorong, and it supports roughly 72,000 residents through 27 public sites. So Wayne, thanks for being here tonight and look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I'm not sure how they get to 27 in their counting. I go with 12. In fact, 14 including Tintinara and Canalpin. So I guess I will just start by sharing a little bit about the role of the local health network. And it's important because it's important in the sense that you know that we're not usually a provider of GP services. So the local health network that I'm CEO of is a state government entity that provides hospital services essentially throughout our region. That includes Tailem Bend Hospital, includes Meningie Hospital. We also provide the nursing and some Country Health Connect, so support at home services across the community, including in the clinics in Tintinara and Canalpin. Commonwealth legislation, the Health Insurance Act 1973, specifically forbids us from providing GP services that are funded through Medicare unless we have an exemption from the Commonwealth to do that. And we don't have an exemption to do that in Meningie or Tailem Bend. And I'm mentioning Meningie because, as many of you know, and I realise we're in Tailem Bend, not Meningie, the Kerrigans, the GPs there, have signalled for quite some time their interest in retiring and handing over their practice to some other provider in the future. And because the reality is that two practices in relatively close proximity available potentially as one combined business may be more attractive to some providers, you know, than just one practice. So in a sense, they're both in play in terms of what's available to someone coming into the Coorong. So the role of the health network is to provide hospital services. And obviously in providing hospital services, we provide a lot of aged care services, including here in Tailem Bend. And so I guess the first thing I want to do is just reassure you all as community members that those services are safe, that the withdrawal of the Murraylands medical practice will not adversely affect those services. Now, in terms of residential aged care, the residents are cared for currently by the GPs from Murraylands medical practice. We do provide GP services in Karoonda, Pinaroo and Lameroo. Some of the doctors that we provide those services with travel past Tailem Bend to access those services, and so they can provide services under the Mallee Medical Practices banner in the hospital for the aged care residents if Murrayland's medical practice aren't. Also, we have a region-wide virtual care service that already supports after-hours care here in Tailem Bend, both through Bridge Clinic and also through the staff at Riverland General Hospital in Berry. So they'll continue to support the nursing care in the ED here and for acute patients. So I mentioned just before, we're not a provider of GP services generally, but as I've just explained, we are a provider of GP services in the Mallee, so Pinaroo, Lameroo, Karoonda, essentially as a provider of last resort. And most of you will have seen the journey that occurred in Karoonda, and it was messy. You will have seen that the owners of the Manor Medical Practice pulled out of providing services in Karoonda, and it took us maybe 6 months from that point in time before there was an exemption in place with the Commonwealth government that allowed us to start providing services. And I share that because it's important to understand that actually the quickest way to get GP services reinstated here, or to ensure continuity of care for residents of Tailem Bend provided with services in Tailem Bend, is actually to have another established practice that isn't state government and isn't local government, because actually local government have the same issue with the Health Insurance Act 1973. So that it's actually another provider who can provide a viable GP practice moving into the community is far better than the health network doing it, even though the health network may do it if no other provider can be found. And that's a political decision. The health network is a state government entity. It's run by a governing board. I report to a governing board. It's a board decision, and may be subject to a discussion with the minister about whether or not we become a provider. And even if we chose to become a provider, it can take 18 months to get that exemption. So what we've done, really in partnership with the council, is we've gone door knocking, in a sense, contacted the other nearby providers, so Bridge Clinic, Night and Day Practice, and other providers, to see if they are interested in establishing the practice here in Tailem Bend. Because we are a landlord of the current practice facility. Technically, it's owned by the Health Advisory Council on your behalf as a community, but for the benefit of the local health service, which is essentially the local health network. We have been unsuccessful with those local providers. We've also had another provider locally express an interest in providing services, but they don't have GPs that can work without supervision, and so therefore can't actually provide a service in Tailem Bend unless they can overcome that hurdle. So supervision is a requirement for GPs from overseas that have moved to Australia, and it's a provider for GPs in training that have done their medical degree, so they're already a doctor, but they're specialising in general practice as a registrar. So technically, it's the Commonwealth Government's responsibility to fund, and you know that through Medicare, and coordinate access to GP services. And their mechanisms for doing that are obviously Medicare for the funding, an agency called the Rural Doctors Workforce Agency, which they fund, and in fact we also fund as a state government, to help communities find GPs, and an agency called the Primary Health Network that provides incentive payments and sort of coordinates a mix of services that GPs provide when they're in place. So I've reached out to the Rural Doctors Workforce Agency. to their CEO. Their CEO has actually connected me up with a potential provider. I've had a discussion with that potential provider today, so that's live at the moment. They've got a board meeting on Thursday night, and they're going to assess whether or not they're interested in coming and visiting Tailem Bend and exploring, establishing a practice here and potentially also Meningie. And I've also talked to the current provider, so Marilynn's medical practice, because they had indicated that they could potentially still provide a part of a service, so sort of a doctor a couple of days a week after the 14th of October. And unfortunately today they have withdrawn that offer, said that they can't staff it. So it's not all good news, but that's just an update of where we are currently. And I guess with that, I'll probably open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, we're going to open up to questions from the floor. So, Emily, if you could take this, and we'll do our best to answer.
Pauline's hand I saw, wasn't it?
Thank you, darling. I'm not a very educated person, but a lot of what you explain I find a bit difficult to follow. A whiteboard would have been handy to explain da-da-da-da. Anyhow, I'll do my best. Tailem Bend, lived here all my life, and we have fought for everything we have got in this town. We've built the hospital, we've done everything. Fundraised our butts off, closed the highway off to save our hospital in '88, and we did it. Is that worthwhile doing? I thought SA Health could help us here. Where are they? What's going on? Why is it so complicated? Why can you organise doctors in the Mallee and not in funny little Tailem Bend? We lose our chemist. We lose our doctors. We lose our identity. We're a wonderful community here. What are you doing, you people that are supposed to be working for us? I don't understand it.
Look, I'll just try to provide some clarity. Two things. When we first called this meeting, we had hoped at that point that we had some more good news to share. And as Wayne said, those doctors have pulled out on us. So I'm sorry about that we don't have that good news tonight, but that is where we're at. With regards to the doctors in the Mallee that Wayne talked about before, the exemption means that a government entity at a state or local level cannot provide doctors without that exemption, and while there is a private practice in the town, it won't be given. Unfortunately, the way the system is set up is almost that something has to fall over before, as Wayne said before, he can go in as a provider of last resort, or council could do the same. And it's not right. I agree with you. I'll go to Wayne for further on that.
I've heard about you, Wayne Champion, and our Dr. Sarah Fensack often would tell me if I had a problem to go and talk to you, and he'll sort it out. Can you sort this out for the Tailem Bend community? I think you should.
So
I'm cross. I'm very cross, and I don't like getting cross. But I just can't believe a town of this size, we've probably got 80% on gophers. I know we've got the beautiful community centre that can provide transport, but it's not the point. We lose our identity, we lose our town, and we've got lots of young people. Jonathan, you must know how many new young people we've got in our town now, building houses, buying old houses, doing them up. You know, we are a big town, good community.
So I'll try and answer the one question that I probably can answer, which is the question about whether or not I can help you and sort it out. And the answer to that is it kind of depends. The easiest way for me to help you is to find another provider, and I've been through sort of the list of ones I've already door knocked. And as I've explained, I'm in discussions with one at the moment that have got a board meeting on Thursday. That provider provides GP services in other rural locations in South Australia, and so are actually quite promising as an option. If they are unavailable, then I have to keep on looking for a provider. Now, I have applied for, or commenced the process of applying for a Section 19(2) exemption. That's Section 19(2) of the Health Insurance Act. I cannot set up a practice that bills Medicare until I've got that in place. And so the answer on that line of inquiry is, don't bank on that being in place in a timely manner, because the experience with places like Karoonda and Meningie, where I've also applied for one when there was a public meeting there maybe a year ago, is that we still haven't got it for Meningie. And Karoonda took an age, and the community went quite some time without a practice before we could then establish a practice. Now, as a health network, we have connections with all of those practices because they provide services in our hospitals. So we've got relationships with them. We've got relationships that can help ensure that your hospital still functions, the one that you closed the streets, to maintain back in the 1980s, that you and your forefathers and mothers fought for, and was built out of community donated time, effort, and materials. That will absolutely still function, and I'm responsible for running that and assuring you that it does. And I'm absolutely committed to doing what I can do to make sure that you have a viable primary health service, so that you only come to the hospital when you actually need hospital care. But in the absence of that, we still have an emergency department, and you can still come to the hospital for care. So the medical centre is owned by the Coorong Health Advisory Council, which Julie here is the presiding member or chair of. It is it's held essentially on behalf of the community by the Health Advisory Council. Health Advisory Councils were formed back in 2008 when the individual community hospital boards ceased to exist. So that the community or a community organisation would still own the hospital assets on behalf of the community. So they own the building, they're the title holder, they're the landlord, if you like, that the people leasing the medical practice lease the building from. The assignee of the benefit, so rent payments from that lease, actually come to the health network as the provider of the local health service, because the Health Advisory Council hold those assets for the benefit of the local health service. It's quite complicated. But it's worth understanding because it's actually important. My organisation messed up the relationship with the GPs, not the Health Advisory Council. We messed that up by evicting them for not paying the rent for 5 years, having signed a lease agreement. Why do I think they didn't pay rent for 5 years? I can't comment on that. Sorry?
You're not in charge. Who is?
Yeah.
Why did you let them go that long without paying rent?
So there's a couple of different questions in there, and most of this is public because it was in the Sunday Mail and shared in a lot of detail. So I'm not going to share all of that detail, but essentially there have been attempts at recovering payment from them for maybe 3 or 4 of those 5 years. There was a delay when a previous organisation, Country Health Local Health Network, existed and then became the Riverland Mallee Coorong Local Health Network when we're split off as separate organisations. Nonetheless, that relationship, if you like, was ruined between the GPs and the health network. We then went through a process of trying to get them back into the practice. We negotiated a settlement. That's all public. It was in the Sunday Mail and the same thing. As part of negotiating that settlement, there was a negotiation of a new lease. And so the expectation always was that when the settlement was finalised, the lease would be signed and the GPs would continue in the community. Settlement was finalised, GPs chose not to sign the lease, and they've exited the community, or issued a notice that they're exiting on the 14th of October. And that is how we got to be where we are now.
Just get the mic up there.
If I may, can I just inquire, the nursing homes, we've got Tailem, Benamaningi, do they have to have a doctor or a qualified nurse, or what was the Commonwealth legislation that was passed that they have to have a on-site medical professional? Is that right?
No, they don't. So nursing homes don't have to have an on-site medical professional. They have to have a health professional, and there's a whole structure around how they're staffed. Now, in terms of the Tailem Bend service here, it's run as a multi-purpose service, not a residential aged care facility. It's a different accreditation structure. Now, the residents have to be able to access a doctor. That doctor is funded through Medicare, and it's kind of coordinated by the facility on behalf of the residents. As I mentioned before, we can provide that service and continue to provide it with the Mallee Medical Practice if Murrayland's medical practice, because it's currently their patients, it's a private relationship between the patient and the medical practice, choose to not be available to see their patients in the facility.
Okay, if I may, also here, have we actually analysed the visits we make to a doctor here? When, I mean, do we need, this will throw us all in and out, do we need a doctor? I mean, how many of us go just for a script or just for, just, because there's others there, isn't there? There's a physio, there's the speech one, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I just thought that would take everyone's attention, and it did very
I think it's
quickly
safe to
indeed.
say the community needs a doctor.
So, would a practicing nurse work for us? A nurse practitioner, does it? Because you're talking about getting someone who's going to bring in GPs under supervision, which is this merry-go-round we've been going on for the last few years, where the minute they get Australian accreditation, they're gone. So is there an alternative to this constant merry-go-round?
So, a few different questions there, and so I'll answer some of them. So a nurse practitioner with prescribing rights, with an advanced scope of practice in rural health, could meet a lot of your needs. Also, there was the question about supervision and the merry-go-round. So we predicted this situation, as a nation, if you like, probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And the challenge in this environment, as you all know, the federal government funds university education. They also fund the medical colleges to provide the advanced training for doctors. And so they effectively, between funding universities and funding the colleges, control the number of doctors coming into the system that are Australian trained. And there's a shortage. Now, on top of that, Australia generally has an ageing population of doctors in rural practice, your country, archetypical country GP, generally male, not always, broad scope of practice, embedded in their community, work all sorts of hours of the day and night in order to ultimately serve the community out of a sense of commitment to the community. And that's unsustainable, and most of those doctors that practiced with that broad scope of practice have been retiring. So we have set up a training program, actually in our region, the Riverland Academy of Clinical Excellence, that currently has 50 doctors, so these people already with medical degrees that are doctors, in training, between being an intern for a year, a junior doctor for 2 years, and a registrar training to be a GP or a rural generalist with advanced scope of practice to work in these country communities. And they're pretty much all Australian trained. But we've got a timing issue in terms of Tailem Bend right here and now, because there aren't any that are training close to Tailem Bend that are at the point where they can practice independently out of that cohort of 50 odd patients, 10 a year coming in over 5 years into a 5-year training program. So the first ones of them are about to graduate, in fact already graduating, with fellowships in general practice. We have 10 of them based in Murray Bridge and Manham, where we have the GP supervisors who are Australian trained, supervising them, in order to populate GP practices in this end of the region. So Sanjeev and the team at Murraylands Medical Practice had a different business model and aren't part of that program. And in terms of the Kerrigans in Meningie, unfortunately are at a stage in their career where it's just kind of too hard to maintain the capability to supervise, which is a shame because it would be a great way of introducing new doctors into their practice that might eventually become practice owners. So is there a solution? Yeah. Is that right here and now for Tailem Bend? Unfortunately not.
Before I take the next question, I just want to cover off on 2 things there. Tailem Bend absolutely needs a doctor. It's unacceptable that a town of this size doesn't have one going forward. We're about to see some pretty explosive growth in this district. And if we want to have people live here, they have to have the services. And that's what council, in conjunction with the LHN, is going to try to fight for. Something else was raised then about nurse practitioners. We can do things a bit differently. We probably should be looking at some what's the word for it, Wayne? Multidisciplinary practice, where you have
broader scope of practice.
Broader scope of practice, where you have a doctor working with a nurse practitioner, playing to each other's strengths. That should be part of the conversation going forward. A question over here.
Yes, thank you. I've lived here only 12 years, but it's been long enough to see the difference in the 8 years that Dr. Sanjeev and his practice was here, the Murraylands Clinic, and the few years before that, when the last couple of years before that, I know that the government was paying interns, people, locums, to come over from interstate $1,000 a day. What part of my question is that I cannot understand, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room, why when we had a very good Murraylands clinic, that they were charged $150,000 over how many years? I can't understand why we weren't just grateful to have such a very good functioning, I haven't finished, functioning practice. I'm sure it'd be better if it was what you said, Mr. Champion, the old-fashioned GP model, but we know we're never going to get that. But the 9 to 5, 5 days a week, really, sometimes I've come out of the clinic and thought it's wonderful living here because everything it can be satisfied for somebody like myself who hasn't got grave difficulties. But I belong to a group here and we have written to the Minister identifying all the things that we're so shocked about. You keep on saying Australian trained, but really Dr. Sanjeev had 2 degrees and the second one was in Switzerland. It was an orthopaedic degree. I'm sure that's not the only criteria that Australia isn't the best. And the other thing is I'd like to ask about, we wrote to the Minister of Health and Wellbeing and I wonder where the Minister is. This is a really serious thing, as other people have mentioned, and yet we can't even get the Minister for our State Minister here. So you could explain both those 2 things? Thanks.
So I mentioned Australian trained because it was part of the question that was asked. But it's absolutely true that appropriately trained is what's important, not necessarily the location of the training. The question about the rent, $154,000 over 6 years is the answer. Which is a... Why? Because the South Australian government's policies require a commercial rental, and so the Crown Solicitor's Office, structures a lease in a way that's commercially oriented. And then we haven't got a doctor. That's right. So it's worth bearing in mind that during that same period, SA Pathology have been paying to sublease part of that facility for more than the total value that the doctors were being charged in lease and weren't paying.
He was invited. He hasn't come. He was invited. I have a hand up over
He
here.
does know that I'm here on behalf
I've got one up the back here first, Jonathan.
Yep. And sorry, I will just say I did have a meeting with the Minister in the last 3 weeks. He will be visiting the district in person and spending at least a day going around talking to community, and we will be advertising that when it occurs. Sorry, this is the State Minister, Blair Boyer, will be coming to the district. I don't have a date, but we'll be following it up. I had a commitment from him that he will be here and he will be talking to people right across the Coorong Council area. Question at the back and then here, I believe.
We moved up here 2.5 years ago from Adelaide to retire. We checked everything out. There was a great medical centre up here, hospital, lovely community, everything like that. So we thought, great, this is going to work fine. Now all we're seeing is bureaucratic bungling, infighting and finger pointing. Why for once can you not put the community in first place and sit in a room together and work something out until you get a decision that works for the community, not for individual people? Now, many years ago, my mother would have put my brother and I in the room if we couldn't get our heads together to work out something to work properly and bang our heads together until we got a decision that worked. Now, it's time that you put the community first instead of individual profit and ideology. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to make the point that Wayne thought he had an answer to this, that our current doctors were going to stay on at least a few days a week to continue some level of service to this community, and they have pulled out. They had their debt wiped, they were supposed to start a new lease, and they pulled out. We cannot control their behaviour. We thought there was a solution. We thought that the room had come together, as you said, knocked some heads and got there. But now we've got to deal with the situation we have where they have withdrawn their service effective October. Next question.
Thank you for the updates. My name is Bianca Gazzola. I'm a local resident from Jervois. I'm a client of the medical centre and I'm the dietitian that's been based there working privately for the last 7 years. So like some of the other questions have asked, there's a range of services that are delivered there, and I absolutely understand that GP services are a priority. They create referrals and they're at the core of what we want at our medical centre. But is there any sort of opportunity for the range of other services that are already existing within the medical centre to be able to continue to offer services like ClinPath so that we can go and have our bloods taken there, and that can be some way managed? I'm aware that there's other small towns across the state that this might be the case, that there are allied health services that can be retained. And if it bridges a gap, it's also more attractive potentially for GP services, knowing that there's remaining allied health services to work with and a supportive health team available as well. Is this anything that's also being pursued and connecting with existing services?
So there are some specific and some not so specific answers to that question. The first general answer is yes, absolutely. Happy to connect and understand your relationship with the existing practice and ensure that we can continue it. We have talked to SA Pathology about continuing their arrangement, and we expect that that will continue into the future. And we've talked to the podiatrist that operates there. So, and certainly happy to engage with anyone else that's been operating as part of the practice, if you like, or out of the practice. Because their relationship's been with Murrayland's medical practice, I haven't necessarily known who they are or how to contact them. So very happy to engage with other providers that are currently providing services to Tailem Bend and the Coorong generally, and to find a way of ensuring that they can continue to do so. And also, you know, if some of you have friends, partners, children that have studied medicine and might be interested in providing practice here or working here under a contract, I'm happy to engage with them as well.
Sorry.
I'd just like to mention, I don't believe it's been mentioned so far, that the Murraylands Medical Practice is building or has built a new practice in Murray Bridge, and that may well be why they cannot service here as well. Just something to think about. Thank you.
Question down the...
Yep. Look, thank you, madam, gentlemen, for being here. Wayne, my question comes back to where are you up to in getting the ticket for you to get doctors here? I understand very clearly that we're going forward, not a history lesson going back, but the process of you being able to bring people here for our benefit and for Menengi, because Menengi is going to be in the same problem in the not too distant future. The other aspect, the other sleeping giant in the room as ancillary services is our pharmacies rely on doctors. So this will have an impact on Tailem Bend. It will have an impact on Menengi. So in essence, it's you guys are running to get new people to take the practice. I applaud that absolutely. But you have to have a backup plan. You have indicated that you are applying, but I do believe it should be more vigorous. I think the council needs to get on board, as well as our MP, and push the case for you guys to be able to provide service. Thank you.
Yeah, probably not much to add to that than what I've already said. We have actually applied. The problem is our experience has been that it just takes far too long, given the time frame that we've got available before the existing provider leaves.
So what else can we do outside the square to try and look for GP? We start advertising. I mean, I know you're doing like personal contacts and that sort of thing, but how do we put the web out to try and get one?
And look, so the question is, what else can we do? Can we start advertising? There's a couple of things. Council that have actually offered to pay the rent for GPs. In other words, the facility can be rent-free. On top of that, you know, as a community, when we do get someone, actually welcoming them to the community, embracing them is really important. Having them feel like a member of the community instead of a visitor to the community, even if they're driving here and back from Adelaide in order to provide a service for you. We are doing everything we can. As I mentioned before, the Rural Doctors Workforce Agency is the agency funded by the Commonwealth to try and find a GP. I've talked to their CEO, and they're going out to their network to try and find a GP for us at the moment. And like I said, we're already in contact with someone that's making a decision, and the organisation's making a decision on Thursday night about their capacity to pursue it. Absolutely, unfortunately, the health network ends up being a provider of last resort, and the challenges involved in getting the exemption under the Health Insurance Act means that's a really messy transition for the community without a service for a while, potentially. In the longer run, hopefully, if we do end up having to take over some of these services, we can actually hand them on in the future to the doctors that we're training, and they can become practice owners of a viable integrated networked community with other nearby practices and the other communities that we're currently providing services in that are being run by the doctors that they trained with.
I'm just going to go to Council CEO Miles.
Yeah,
Something
thank
back?
you. I just needed to clarify for everyone here, yes, council has offered to put the rent forward, but you were offering a lower rent and it's around about $8,000 per annum. So I don't want people thinking that it was a huge number that council was committing to. It was 8,000, and if that makes somewhat of a difference to a GP, then I think that's a good thing.
That's right. It was a much reduced rent payment that we had agreed with the current provider in the new lease agreement that they then didn't sign as part of the deed of settlement.
I just want to go back to that question as well, because we have been working with the Kerrigans at Meningie for a longer period of time. We've known for well over 12 months that that service was very much at risk as they approach retirement. And this is we thought it was fixed, and obviously it's now not in Tailem. But from a council point of view, we are trying to work with the Kerrigans to ensure that there's another doctor that comes into their practice currently. That's trying to leverage networks as well to see if we can assist with recruitment. And I think that might be something we need to look at here. And Wayne identified before, having a practice operating between the two towns would be perhaps a much more viable option with more doctors in the business. Because as he said, we're not at that 24/7 GP state anymore. The next generation of GPs wants to be able to have their weekends. They want to be able to have a lifestyle that goes with it.
And look, just on top of that, probably even more importantly, is you need a practice, a structure that's not going to fall over as soon as a single individual leaves. So that's one of the reasons for wanting a network, like an integrated network of practices instead of just individuals trying to run individual practices.
Tammy?
Tammy Shepherd, Tailem Community Centre. So I want to make a few points here. Pauline alluded to many years ago, we did a lot of fundraising in this community to offer incentives to come to be a doctor in this region. I'd question, you said, one of the first things you said, Wayne, is that it isn't a state nor local government responsibility to fix this. Yet if council are contributing money to cover the rates from ratepayer funding, are we not just doing what the community did once upon a time, where we are contributing funding to an incentive that is the responsibility of the Commonwealth Government? I just also want to point out our member for MacKillop raised it in Parliament today, and Minister Boyer, who is our state member, and Jonathan, you said he's coming to the region to spend a day. That's fantastic. But again, the responsibility lies with the Commonwealth. So as a community, what can we do? Because the baby that cries the loudest gets the bottle. And what we're seeing consistently is our region, not just Tailem Bend, Meningie, Limestone Coast, we're being overlooked. And it's unacceptable. And if we see a huge facility that's just been built in Mount Barker, absolutely beautiful hospital, how close to the CBD where you've got multiple other health facilities to access, but the further you go out, the services are increasingly limited. And then we also look at this doctor shortage isn't just our community problem. This is a national issue. We're seeing so many doctors that are being enticed with incentives to Queensland, $40,000 for free training to go into state. Again, what are the Commonwealth doing to keep those 50 doctors that you have in the Riverland wanting to stay in our state and provide services to our community? This is a bigger picture issue, and we as a community all need to do more, but we need you to tell us, what can we do? Because what we've done to date hasn't worked. We've been writing letters to ministers, we've been having conversations, and we're not being heard. So please, I beg you, tell us, what can we do as a community to change this current situation? Because talking about the problem, we need a solution. Please give us that.
You want to talk about the bin markets thing? Because that is something you have to do.
So, Tammy, I'll cover part of that question. The funding we've applied for through the Commonwealth goes directly to that. It's about conducting a
Into
study.
the mic, please, Jonathan.
Sorry, is that
Into the
better?
mic, yeah.
Okay. It's about looking at our district, and this isn't just Coorong, this is Coorong, Upper Limestone Coast and Mallee, looking at what we've lost and trying to come up with a plan to bring it back. And that the outcome of that study will potentially be Commonwealth funding. It's why we want to be on board for that. So that's what Council's been doing. We've been to the State Minister, we've asked for support, we've been to the Federal Minister. I had hoped that tonight we would be coming to you to tell you that there was an ongoing service. A week ago, that's what I thought this conversation was going to be. We may need to go out and raise an absolute ruckus. I'm hoping in the next few weeks we do come up with a solution, and if not, as a council, we'll be coming back to you to tell you that yes, we're going to have to go and fight, and we're going to have to fight damn hard.
As a community,
And-
I just want to say, and I speak on behalf of myself, I don't want to see council putting more money in to fix this problem. I want accountability for who is responsible, and that is the Commonwealth.
Yeah, so I guess as a community, what you can do is you can write to your local member, you can write to the Commonwealth Health Minister, and you can, of course, as some of you have been doing, continue to write to the State Minister, because it is a shared problem. There might be a level of government that's responsible for it, but, state, local government, we have skin in the game too. That's why we're here. It affects our ability ultimately in the long run to provide hospital services. It affects the demand for hospital services if the community don't have access to the primary health services that they need. It affects the health and well-being of the community, which is actually what we're all about. I'm happy to suggest that you advocate for your health needs. One of the ways you can do that is through the Health Advisory Council. That's why Julie's here, because they can write, they can petition the Commonwealth Government just as easily as anyone else. But ultimately, anything we can do, anything you as a community can do that help expedite that exemption process, if you like, means that at least there's a backup plan in play as opposed to this horrible gap waiting for it to come into play.
Could I just ask, who owns the medical centre, the nursing home, the doctor's home next to the clinic, the hospital now? Who owns those buildings, please?
So the Coorong Health Advisory Council
Owns them,
owns them?
the lot. And they
okay.
make decisions on who goes where and everything about those buildings.
Not entirely, because the Healthcare Act strips many of the benefits of ownership off them in favour of the local health service, which is the local health network. So essentially, Julie and I, if you like, as the CEO of the local health network, the two organisations that we represent between us have all of the rights and responsibilities of ownership. Unfortunately, Julie gets lots of the responsibilities and I get lots of the rights.
With the other, can I just keep going while I remember, because I've got old and I forget. With the other services that can continue over there, like our blood and different, sorry, I've lost the words, but the other services that we talked about, we could keep going. Who's going to pay the rent there? Who's going to pay the rent there? We built all those buildings with subsidy from government. We closed the highway off in '88 with trucks, tractors to save our hospital, and we won. So maybe we have to do that again.
So the question about who will pay the rent comes down to the individual arrangements with each of the providers. And without having talked to all of the providers, I couldn't outline that. What I mentioned before, SA Pathology, which is part of SA Government, part of SA Health, just like the local health network that I run is part of SA Health, reports to the same minister, has been paying rent to Maryland's medical practice, and the rent is far more than Julie and I, between ourselves, have been charging Maryland's medical practice. So the reality is that the state government has been paying the rent.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question down the back and then one over the side here.
There's one at the front too, I think.
Okay, we'll take the hand to the back and then
Yep.
the one on my left.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. My name's Dave. Like the gentleman just here, I moved to Tailem Bend because of its facilities. My wife and I are of poor health, so much so that my wife has passed on. One of the major things that enticed us to move here to this magnificent community was the fact we had an excellent working hospital and an excellent medical system. Over the 10 years that I've been here, it has deteriorated to the state it is at the moment because of somebody somewhere is not keeping tabs on what the hell is going on. Now, I raise a very, very basic question about what price do you put on somebody's life because of these poor, ailing facilities and the system. There is another person here that I know will agree with what I'm saying because I was a divisional officer in St John's. I was an air paramedic for the ambulance. And we both know the extreme extent of expedient diagnosis of patients to be able to save their lives. If we've got to go to Murray Bridge or Karoonda or Canalpin to get a doctor's opinion to save that person's life, that person is going to be dead. No questions asked. And I would also like to say that I am very sort of disappointed with the council. They can't even afford a decent sound system. So please get off your backsides and sort this out before it costs more lives. Thank you.
Well, that might be a problem we can actually fix. The question over here, please. And thank you for your contribution.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. I have owned a home in this town for 30 years. And when I came here, we've all seen the doctors that we've had around the place. We've all appreciated the doctors we've had. And to the point we appreciate the doctors we've got until the middle of October. My biggest problem in listening tonight is hearing that this may take 18 months to sort out. I also lived in Tintinara for quite a few years, and I was an ambulance officer in Tintinara. Tintinara was told 18 months to get things back into their health centre. I left Tintinara in 1995. They still haven't got a health centre. Yes, it's there. We had great doctors at Keith. We had great doctors at Meningie. Keith, hit and miss. Meningie, struggling. You say 18 months. Is it possibly 18 months, or do we have to actually think a long time past that?
I'm just going to touch on a couple of things first. So I live 25 kilometres outside of Tintinara. For my family to get medical care, it's at least 50 to 60 kilometres. We tend to go to Keith for the urgent care clinic down there. Sometimes we go to Meningie and occasionally Canalpin if it's open. And I've been fighting to get more services back into Tinti in that clinic for as long as I've been on council. Now, I can give you some good news about that. Through conversations with Wayne in the last little while, we've now got the local physio potentially going back into that building. And in the last week, I've had conversations with the Keith Medical Centre about them providing services at least a day a week there. So we're heading roughly, at least somewhere, down there in a...
Thank you for that. My biggest thing is, I live 20 kilometres out of Tinti and Colbatch, and yes, it was to Keith or Meningie. It was a huge run there and back. But how long does Tailem have to wait to get these services if we lose them?
What I was going to get to is, in my view, we have to move heaven and earth to make sure it doesn't happen because we can't wait 18 months. There has to be a solution here that is focused completely on continuity of care. I don't have the answer for you tonight, but that's what I'll be trying to achieve with what we can do. and I'll pass over to Wayne for more comment.
And look, in a sense, there is no more comment. It's how long is a piece of string question. If the Commonwealth process around the exemption can be expedited, because that's the thing that can take up to 18 months, then the time frame can be shorter. If the end outcome is the local health network, which is primarily designed to run hospital services, ends up running a GP service. If, on the other hand, the organisation that I'm in contact with that's making a decision on Thursday night actually says yes, there might not actually be a gap. And if we can find another provider, if that provider's a no, equally, there might be a much smaller gap. So really, we still need to do our best to find any pathway to a provider establishing a viable service in the community. You know, it's an attractive community on the river, not far from Adelaide and Murray Bridge, the big smoke, if you like. It shouldn't be as hard as it is in somewhere like Karoonda or Pinnera or Lameroo that are further away from a larger population centre.
Thank you. Councillor Roundtree down here. So we've got one here.
Thanks, are you sure? All right.
Thank you very much. So 3 questions. You talk about the exemption that you've already got underway for Meningie. Can Tailem Bend be tacked onto that exemption so that we're not starting from scratch is the first question. Okay, you're shaking your head.
It can't, but we have applied for Tailem Bend as well, but only in the last week.
Can you explain what the process is in getting an exemption? I struggle to see how it takes 18 months or longer.
So do I.
But what do you do? Is it a piece of paper? Is it a meeting? Is it a study? Is it a report? Is it someone visiting? Like, what is the process?
So the process is, the Health Insurance Act is the Act of Parliament, Commonwealth Act, that provides for the Medicare system. In that Act, there are protections, if you like, that prevent state government and local government from playing the Medicare system for financial benefit. Okay? And so those protections that protect the Commonwealth government, if you like, from having the state government get Commonwealth funding through Medicare, there's an exemption process around that protection, and that exemption is, what we're applying for. The application process, in a sense, is a form. It's a standardised process that the Commonwealth government have. On top of the form, there's a requirement that any existing provider that's providing services in the community support your exemption application. So, in other words, if Murrayland's medical practice didn't support us to apply for the exemption, we couldn't apply for the exemption.
But they have?
Well, their letter of resignation, if you like, the letter saying that they're ceasing to provide services, we've attached as a letter of support saying that they're no longer, we no longer need a letter of support from them because they've declared their hand, they're not going to provide services. So, that's the framework in place is there to
So where is the letter gone now?
practice.
Where is the letter?
So it
sitting
goes
today?
up through SA Health, through their intergovernment relations section, and then to the Commonwealth government. And to my knowledge, it's now with the Commonwealth government for their consideration.
So if we wanted to protest or kick up a stink, we'd be going to Canberra?
Yep, Health Minister or local Commonwealth member would be the first place to start.
Thank you.
Down here and then across. Good.
I actually had the same question. I was really curious about the process. Sorry, I was just interested in the process myself. But I will give you an example. My grandson was sick today and he was taken to the local hospital and they didn't have oxygen for a 2-year-old, so they had to throw him into an ambulance and then take him down to Adelaide. And then while they're on their way down, the AMBOs said, oh, look, the locums aren't really good. They don't understand that it takes you 2.5 hours to get down to Adelaide. Why don't we stop in at Murray Bridge? So that's what they did, and you know, he was obviously fine. But I guess what I'm hearing tonight, and that was a coincidence that that happened today, because he couldn't breathe. But what I'm hearing is the system is broken, and it's not just about, you know, Tailem Bend or Meningie. It's about getting the system right. Am I wrong?
I don't think you are wrong. Question over here.
Yeah, my name's Neville Merritt. I've lived in the area for quite a long time, as you can see. But what I'd like to know what the government is doing about recruiting more people to take the profession on. I mean, obviously everything that we've discussed tonight is the fact that we haven't got enough people that are capable of doing the job. And we've got the facilities to train more doctors, to train more medicos, etc. But it appears as if we haven't got the finance to do it, or haven't we got, our people aren't intelligent enough to be able to take it on. So we have to encourage people from overseas to come in to do what our own people should be doing. I've had quite a lot of skin grafts and stitches and needles and all that sort of stuff. And majority of time, the guy that is actually running the show is of a foreign race. I just wonder why we're not training more doctors and associates.
Look, I don't think it's easy to answer in a simple statement in a sense. The university education is funded by the Commonwealth Government. The colleges that manage the postgraduate training for doctors are funded by the Commonwealth for that training provision. The training of doctors, if you like, if a kid grows up in Tailem Bend, wants to become a doctor, usually age 17 or 18, they leave school, they go to the city to study health sciences, perhaps they do a health science degree, then a medical degree, a graduate medical program. That's 6 years of training, and then they become an intern in a city hospital, and then they are a junior doctor, which is a process of gaining clinical skills in 3 or 6 month rotations as a junior doctor or a house officer in a metropolitan hospital for a year or two before they then specialise and become a registrar. And if they're actually a smart young doctor, what happens is a cardiology surgeon, professor of cardiology, taps him on the shoulder and goes, "Hey Neville, you're a promising young doctor. I want you to be my registrar." And that's very enticing for a young kid from Tailem Bend. Now, every connection that someone makes in their life between age 17 and age 27, so odds are they've met a new life partner, taken up new hobbies, changed from being a child to an adult, is made in the context of the city they're living in while they're doing that training. And it's all of those bonds that a small country community are trying to recruit them against in order to recruit them to a small private business of a general practice in a country town. That's why it's so hard. Now, in terms of what we've done to address that, in our region, here in Riverland Mallee Currong Local Health Network, we've established the Riverland Academy of Clinical Excellence. But we've done that in the Riverland because that's where we had the supervision capability. We haven't had the supervision capability in this end of the region. And as I mentioned before, we've got 10 doctors in training between Murray Bridge and Mannum in order to populate the future GPs of this part of the region. But they're only in sort of year 2 and 3 of that 5 years of postgraduate training. And the access to that postgraduate training is managed by the colleges, which are funded by the Commonwealth, as I mentioned before. Because really it's a Commonwealth responsibility, but we're stepping in to make it happen for us in the region. So there's no easy answer. We're doing what we can is probably the answer.
How many will be qualified within the next 2 years?
I would say 15, because it's a
not enough,
5-year
is it?
training program with 10 entering each year, starting 5 years ago.
We need to find a way of doing it. That's not enough.
Councillor Roundtree, and then any further questions?
I was just going to support what Wayne has said. My daughter grew up on a farm in Canalpin. She did 3 years of nursing, then went on to become a doctor. And pretty much exactly as Wayne has just described is what happened. She moved to the city. She did, yes, like I said, 3 years of nursing. None of what she learnt in nursing was transferable to a medical degree. Did her degree, is now a doctor. She's based at Royal Adelaide. She's engaged to another doctor because that's where all her friends are. She was rurally bonded, but she can pay her way out of being rurally bonded. And I don't think that should be allowed, but she can. She was supposed to come back and do country training. Mount Barker's considered country, so you can do Mount Barker. There are so many flaws in the system that are preventing these young doctors from going out further. They also see the bricks and mortar setup where you buy a practice, you run your own business, you pay medical, you pay the doctors, you pay your rent, you pay your supplies and all of that, insurance. They don't want that because they can earn as much money just working at a big training hospital in the city than they can by taking on the bricks and mortar business out here, and they don't want it. And they also don't want the lifestyle of being on call 24/7, not having a weekend off, not being able to go to the football game without being inundated by, I've got a sore knee, are you a doctor, can you help me? And so it's never ending for them, and I think we've seen that with the Kerrigans, that, you know, they're very always on the job. Wherever they go, they're on the job. And what I've learnt about watching young doctors come through is that there are so many flaws in the system, and as described, she will eventually, her partner got tapped on the shoulder. They're always keen, if you're good, to keep you in the Royal College of Cardiology or the Royal College of whatever. And getting into the Royal College of GPs is actually considered one of the, like, is stepping down in your career. So it's not elevated enough that they see it as prestigious. It's like, well, you couldn't be a cardiologist, you couldn't be a dermatologist, let's be a cardiologist. I'll be the general practitioner. So that's got to change. And so in the system that's training these young people, that itself needs to be thoroughly overhauled, and it needs to be attractive, financially attractive, incentivise them to come here like we used to do with teachers, like give them the house, give them the things to get them to come here. So I guess I've seen firsthand how much of a struggle this is.
Interestingly, I don't give them houses. I give them 5 years of employment certainty because as an intern, they only have 12 months of employment certainty straight out of university. And then as a junior doctor, they've only got the length of the rotation they're on as employment certainty. And what that means is that in the Riverland and Murray Bridge and Manham now, they can take out mortgages and they're buying their own houses and they're having children with the partners that they're meeting that are doing the same thing over the 5 years we've been running it. So now we have doctors in training that are buying houses in our region, and we just need to spread that geographically across the whole of the region so that places like Tailem Bend and Meningie benefit from that as well.
Hello, my name is Foster Davis. I'm the Deputy CEO of Murray Mallee Aged Care Group. We've obviously been watching what's happening in Tailem Bend, and we've expressed an interest in what's happening with Tailem Bend. And I just wanted to put it out there that if anyone has any networks with allied health providers, we've recently opened an allied health clinic in Murray Bridge, and we would be certainly interested in extending that to Tailem Bend to continue some sort of ancillary services here in whatever way we can support. So if there are practitioners, if there are providers, then we certainly would be happy to look at supporting the business systems and structure behind that. So feel free to talk to me afterwards.
Any further?
Seeing as you all have got all this all sorted, what do we do until you actually get doctors here? You can't go to Murray Bridge because they don't want new patients. You go to Adelaide. Anyone that doesn't drive, how do they get there? We have a limited bus service here. So, and once we do go to other doctors in other towns, what happens to our chemist when he's not getting the business he's usually getting here? What do we do in the meantime? Not what's happening in the future. We want to know now. Where do we go?
So up until the middle of October, you keep going to the current doctors.
And after middle of October, where do we go?
And we are going to try to move heaven and earth to make sure that there is continuity of service from the middle of October forward. And that's what we're going to try to do. We'll go to Wayne.
In other words, you've got no say.
Look, the only other advice I'd say is, you can bring your prescription back here to get it filled.
Question down here.
I was just wondering, because we've got, 4 doctors over here now, and we only got a new one about 2 or 3 months ago. Where are they going to go now? Do they want to leave the town? Where are they going to?
We're not sure, but we are presuming possibly the new clinic in Murray Bridge.
Yeah, a clinic in Murray. Yeah, I did wonder that.
They've expanded the service in Murray Bridge,
Yeah.
and I'm very much saying that's a presumption.
Yeah.
But that's where we think, or what we think might be happening.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. It's very sad, I feel, because I was nursing many years ago now, and we didn't have a problem in the world. Absolutely nothing like this. I think it's all government run, sort of, I don't know. I just don't understand. I just don't. Thank you.
Down the back and then in the middle.
What happens to the hospital without a doctor? Are the nurses the ones that are responsible to keep people alive that turn up in their emergency department? Or?
No, so I'll go to Wayne on that, but I think in terms the doctor practice versus the hospital are 2 different issues. So Wayne.
Well, the doctor's always been at an emergency centre and working out the hospital at the same time all these years. So what happens to the hospital part without a doctor?
So I'm in charge of that. That is the one bit I am in charge of. So we have arrangements in place to ensure that we can continue to support the nurses through telehealth, from a telehealth service that we run. So in other words, the reality is that after hours, right now, if someone is unwell, the GPs from Tailem Bend won't respond and support the nurses. The nurses are currently supported by telehealth from Bridge Clinic after hours and on weekends. That arrangement's been in place for as long as the current provider has been providing the GP practice, in fact, even longer. And so that arrangement will continue. And on top of that, we also have our own service that we can support with that as well. Now, we can provide state-funded hospital services using our own salaried staff or locums. We can't bill Medicare and provide GP services because of the issue with the Health Insurance Act. So I'm going to assure you the hospital is covered one way or another. We have ways of providing for the needs of the aged care residents if their current local GPs don't wish to carry on providing their care, which they may wish to do because it's actually quite lucrative and they can do it from Murray Bridge if they wish to. But we have ways of ensuring that they get covered as well. So the hospital will continue, aged care will continue. The issue, and I don't want to understate it, it's a big community issue, is access to GP services for the rest of the community's health and well-being.
Question in the back.
Well, once again, I must say that I am disillusioned with the council. I am disillusioned with the health system. All I'm hearing is a repetitive thing about passing the buck. It's not my fault. I'm tied down with rules, regulations, rubbish and red tape. You are put in your positions that you are in to represent us people. Why aren't you getting the job done?
I'll take that as a comment. Tammy, it's in the front here.
Just a question, we've got Foster up the back there that's expressed an interest, and you've said that an organisation that may want to take on the clinic would require a doctor to oversee the student doctors or the interns. What does that look like? Is that a 38-hour week that a doctor needs to be at that clinic shadowing those interns, or what does that look like? If there was somebody, a potential retired doctor within our community, and they expressed an interest to come back in that supervisory role, what would that look like?
The answer is it depends entirely on what the supervision needs are of the person being supervised. So if they are an international doctor on one of the pathways for international doctors getting registration in Australia, it usually looks like level 1 supervision, then level 2 supervision, both of which sort of require someone, so level 1's in the same room, level 2's in the same building, if you like, and then they get to level 3 supervision where they can operate independently with a structured check and review process. Is the providing the level 1 and 2 supervision require that you have a member of a fellow of the College of GPs or Royal and Remote Medicine there on site supporting the service. So it really comes down to the individual doctor, what international qualification they've got, how that's recognised in Australia by the Medical Council and APRA in order to what their supervision requirements are. Now, and that's the challenge, if you like, because
how long does that supervision last?
it depends on the individual, and it also depends on their qualifications and experience, 2 to 3 years. It may be longer for some people, depends how they go with their exams and tests and stuff as well.
And does that quality of that level of supervision apply for your guys as well that are doing your training?
A different process, because there's a different pathway, if you like, for people that have a primary medical degree that is from Australia, have general registration in Australia, training to then be a GP. So different structure and different requirements, but absolutely some of the supervision requirements are the same at different levels of different times during their training.
I apologise if this is obvious to everyone, but no need to make a trip to Canberra because the Federal Minister for Health is Mark Butler, who's the member for Port Adelaide, a lot closer, hey? Parliament doesn't sit all the time, as we know. And my other point was that it was very good to hear that the rent has been, if I understand it properly, that the rent has been reduced to $8,000, is it? So 8 8s is 64. So Murraylands Medical Clinic would have only had to been paying $64 as opposed to $150,000, which is, we can't help but say that's a real pity.
Yeah, and as you'll know from the Sunday Mail, we settled for less than that as well.
Are there any further questions? Sorry, Dan.
So you guys are trying to work the solution out as best you can, but October's coming pretty quick. So do we have another meeting, or at what time do we then try and get a nurse practitioner in starting from October or something.
So
If your solutions are not going to come to fruition.
So we'll continue to work with Wayne over the next few weeks to hopefully come to some sort of solution. And as I said, what we're aiming for is continuity of care from mid-October forward. If we don't have a clear pathway in the next few weeks, then I think it comes back to some comments from my left before. We have to get out and fight like hell and make a fuss and make sure that we're seen, heard, and that we get an outcome from government here.
And I just, on the nurse practitioner thing, it doesn't need to be one or the other, it can be both. So just because we're looking for a GP isn't a reason to not also look for a nurse practitioner.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yep.
saying. The nurse practitioner would be ready to go
Maybe.
if you hadn't had the GP solution solved.
Well, folks, we might start heading towards wrapping up. Are there any further?
Well, just one. Just one. Sorry. You're doing a good job, Jonathan. Can we do a big advertising campaign? Come to Tailem Bend, clinic on the river, you know? Spread the news, not just go through the normal little channels. Can we get some television coverage?
The question I'd ask you is, in what other state would you be an hour to an hour and a half out of a capital city on waterfront and be struggling to get a doctor?
Yeah.
There is potentially a marketing aspect to this. This is a great community. Wellington's a great community. Meningi's a great community. It's close proximity. This shouldn't be this hard. And what you've just raised is something that we have been talking about, particularly with the Kerrigans over the last few months.
Yes.
Does this need to have an aspect of tourism marketing associated with it?
Tammy and her crew could create some terrific advertising ads, I'm sure. Thank you.
And look, advertising practices is actually something that the RDWA that I mentioned before is funded for. And so I have talked to them about that already in terms of starting a conversation. So
Still got one house as well.
there are opportunities, accommodation, there's the locum flat, there's a whole lot of different options for, people interested in practicing here. And we have a community, you ladies and gentlemen, ready to embrace them.
If I may, I'll put my foot in mouth again. Yes, we do need a doctor probably. The reality is I think most of us here are old enough to remember we did have fantastic country doctors. Unfortunately, they're either retired or 6 feet under nowadays. And won't correct, the reality is that this new generation of people coming through university are motivated by the dollar sign rather than by country. And I have to say, I've got that, actually experienced it. Here I am in Bridge Clinic, and this young doctor who just graduated, just joined the clinic, and then he found out that what he's got to do, and he said he's out, back to the city as fast as he could move. So I don't envy Wayne coming up with a solution. I think the important thing to remember from what you said, we do have a community transport scheme that works, and it works quite well here. If we have to go to the bridge to see a doctor, I can't see a doctor turning us away, and if it's really urgent, we've got the hospital. So I think we'll survive until yet another, by the sound of it, merry-go-round doctor turned up under supervision or something.
All right, folks. Well, we might wrap the evening up. I'll be hanging around for a little while. If you'd like to raise anything further, please come and have a chat with us. Thank you for coming out tonight, and we'll do the best we can.
It's okay. Always interesting.